For some people, their pill of choice, if you will, is yoga or meditation. And for those of us in our corner of the world with testing, it might be Selenium or Appium or Jenkins or whatever it is. But we have to figure out how to make that work. And I think it's definitely a worthy goal.
Hit it.
Welcome to the Test Talks Podcast, the place to go to geek out on software testing. And now your host, whose mission is to help you succeed with test automation, Joe Colantonio.
Hey, it's Joe, and welcome to another episode of Test Talks. Today, in this episode, we're going to be test talking with Shailesh Rao, current COO of BrowserStack. Shailesh has also previously worked at companies like Google to help develop and scale their cloud platforms, as well as also leading groups at SAP and Salesforce. So Shailesh really knows his stuff when it comes to software development, and more importantly, why software quality is so important to get baked into your software development lifecycle. So that's what we'll be talking about all about today, the state of software quality in 2018 and why it's even more important now than ever before. You don't want to miss it? Check it out. Test Talks is sponsored by the fantastic folks at Sauce Labs, the cloud-based automated testing platform that eliminates the need to maintain your own Selenium grid and test infrastructure. Try it for free today. Visit testtalks.com and click on the Sign Up Now link under the homepage sponsor section. Hey Shailesh, welcome to Test Talks.
Hello, Joe. Thank you for having me.
It's great to have you on the show today. Today I thought we'd talk about the state of software quality in 2018 and what is automation testing, or how does automation testing come into play with that. But before we get into it, could you just tell us a little bit more about yourself?
Great. Thank you, Joe. Looking forward to it. And again, appreciate the opportunity to be with you and your listeners and viewers. I'm a big fan of the podcast. It's been a great resource for me, as well as folks in my company, as well as I think a lot of professionals in the industry. So again, thank you on behalf of everyone at BrowserStack and everyone in the industry. So a little bit about myself. I am COO of BrowserStack based in San Francisco. We're a company that is located in India, Dublin, and San Francisco for now. We've been around for 7 years, and we offer a full suite of automation testing products, both for browsers as well as mobile apps. And I joined about 8 months ago after spending about 7 years at Google, where I ran the cloud platform business. Before that, I was at SAP, the German software company, or German headquarters software company. I've spent about 25 years, almost all of it has been in the enterprise software business. And the last, I would say, 15 or so in pure B2B SaaS. So this is an exciting time for the industry, and I'm really excited to be here with you.
Awesome. Yeah, I'm really excited to have you, especially since you work for a company that probably speaks to a lot of, I would think, enterprise-wide companies, and especially you have a pulse in San Francisco and India, which are pretty much the biggest tech areas around. So I guess my first question would be, since you did work at Google before and you've been around a little bit, for modern software development IT, it seems to have gotten so complex. We used to have this concept of bug-free software, and I don't think that was ever possible, but especially nowadays, it's so hard and so complex. Do you think, where do you see larger companies? How do they actually produce quality software in this rapid pace kind of ship first type mentality?
Yeah, great question, Joe. I mean, I think, when I think of bug-free software, it's a great concept. Why not? Obviously, we want to have bug-free software, but in some ways, it seems almost like the promise of the paperless office, which I think we've been talking about for at least my entire professional career for 30 years. And I don't think the paperless office has really become a reality. There's definitely less paper around, but people still use it. So we just have to recognize that bug-free software is a great ideal. Obviously, something for us to shoot for and try to aim for it. But the way I look at it is, especially for large companies, but I think more so now even for any software company, or for that matter, any company, given that software is pretty much at the cornerstone or the heart of any company today in any form of commerce that you want to engage in. The idea of bug-free software, I think it's still a realistic goal, but it's just really hard to achieve. And thanks to a lot of tools, thanks to a lot of open source technologies, practices, awareness, and, like anything else, as people become more aware of it, it becomes easier. But fundamentally, it's just really hard to achieve, right? I think of it as almost like saying, if I were to rephrase your question and cast it in a way that I think all of us, as human beings living in this digital age are aware of, has modern IT become so complex that bug-free software is unrealistic? And, to me, it's similar to thinking about, has digital technology made our life so complex that a stress-free life is no longer realistic? I'm a father of two teenage kids, and I think that resonates with everybody who has to deal with that demographic. But do we have a stress-free life? No. But do we want to get it? Is it worth it? Yes. What do? You realize that change is hard because it's very convenient to get distracted by all the fads and all the obviously things that you need to do to be successful. But you got to realize that change is hard. You need the discipline. And this is in our personal lives to be stress-free. I think the same applies almost one-to-one to software and being bug-free. If you're a large company, maybe more so because of all the legacy and the complexities that are inherent in your business because of your size. But, you gotta manage that change. You gotta have the discipline. And if it's a worthy enough goal, which I think bug-free software is, just like a stress-free life, you gotta stick with it. There's going to be ups and downs. You're going to slip and fall. You're going to have, failures just as you have victories, but you got to stick with it, and you got to make a habit out of it. For some people, their pill of choice, if you will, is yoga or meditation. And for those of us in our corner of the world with testing, it might be Selenium or Appium or Jenkins or whatever it is. But we have to figure out how to make that work. And I think it's definitely a worthy goal. It's definitely harder, bottom line. But it's definitely worth doing.
Absolutely. And especially in this environment of DevOps, I know there's a culture around continuous testing, but it always seems to be focused just on DevOps. Is there any places in the business itself you think it could be optimized to help software be created right the first time?
Oh, definitely. I think DevOps is, the container maybe in which it becomes most easily manifested. It's where most people look to find those easy wins, or early wins at least, and the obvious ones. I don't mean to say that it's easy in any way, but across the business, for the entire business as a whole, independent of whether you're doing, whether you're writing software, whether it needs to be tested or not. I'm a big fan of Stoicism and Seneca. I think Seneca first said something about quality over quantity. I think Steve Jobs followed up with one home run better than two doubles. So the idea of quality being centric to everything we do is not an foreign concept to any business. There are companies whose taglines have the word quality in them. It's so inherent that it doesn't need any explanation. I think when we talk about continuous testing and DevOps, it's a very obvious place where it gets manifested, given how much companies rely on software today, independent of what industry you're in. And Andreessen famously said the software is eating the world, and every company is a software company. So those are real, and some companies feel it more than others. Some companies feel the pain more than others, and some deal with it better than others. So it's not really a software concept. Quality is a fundamental concept to our lives, to the way we interact with people, and to the way companies run. Software quality has obviously come to the forefront, I think, driven by the fact that software has become so critical to every company's success. It's no longer nice to have. It's pretty much one of the cornerstones of every company's mere existence. I think just like, financial strength and humans and talent and processes, et cetera, have become cornerstones. So I think we just see more of it in DevOps, but I definitely don't think it's applicable only to software. I think it stems from, do you really believe, is your guiding principle, one of your guiding principles as a business centered around quality? Quality in everything, in the people you hire, in the culture you create, in the centricity you show to your customers, and in the way you run DevOps or use DevOps and continuous integration, continuous delivery, whatever the case may be, to create incredibly awesome software. And to me, I think it's not an act, or it's not just one thing to do. It's something you do every day. It's a habit.
Absolutely. And I think that's critical what you say about quality. I think sometimes companies say they want quality, but then they always say they want to get features out the door as fast as possible. So it's almost like users become our beta users. And I think that could be really dangerous. So in your experience, have you seen how quality can actually affect the end user, or examples of things you've seen that go through the door that probably shouldn't have?
Yeah, there's so many. The one that just comes to mind is I can't remember if it was 2017 feels too recent, but maybe it was 2016 when was it DIN, the company that had the massive DDoS attack and people couldn't access Reddit and Airbnb and Twitter and all of these companies. And it was just this. It was not, there were DDoS attacks and then there was this big one. And I think it happened again. And I remember because I was on vacation, I was trying to, be on social media and we couldn't get in. And I'm like, what's going on? And it was massive. That's just one example where the impact of something like that happening affects so many people, not necessarily your intended audience, but just can spread like wildfire. And, again, mistakes happen. We're all humans. We make errors. But I think that's one example that comes to mind. There are others. If you look at, that's maybe one example from daily life. I can think of, something more severe, right? Okay, fine. I can't go to Twitter. That's fine. But, all the hacking examples that we read about recently, I think there was Equifax. Before that, I remember, was it, shoe company? Was it retail stores? Just, hacking. And that's problematic because, your future could get compromised if your personal data is being, shared with other people, misused to do all sorts of bad things. Credit card fraud. We've had that a lot in the last few. Again, just feels like it happens all the time. And there's, you have economic risk, tremendous pain. I even remember recently, I don't recall the airline, and I definitely, don't mean to, it could happen to anybody, I guess. But, all the flight cancellations that happened recently, I remember I travel a lot. So these things show up on my feed. And then that's more than an inconvenience if, public transport means like that are compromised because of a glitch in software. I remember when I read that news, there's obviously the inconvenience. I was in an airport and, all the rerouting and everything. But the thought that came to my mind at the time, I remember vividly, was, what if there were, life-saving medicines that were being transported on this plane that just got, on this flight that just got canceled. So these things can, we can look at it from the, almost limited view of, okay, software, it's work, there's quality, we got to fix it. Yes, we got to do our thing. Sometimes stuff happens that isn't ideal. But the reality is when these things happen and when, as you said, poor software quality, does it affect users? Yeah. And it affects them now, again, with the ubiquity of software and the fact that it runs pretty much everything, it affects millions of users in an instant. And in some cases could be even life-threatening. So yeah, it's a very real issue that we all have to deal with as software professionals.
Absolutely. And what I've seen, maybe it's just my organization, is sometimes people overcompensate for these type of slips by automating everything. So, in your experience, where do you think the right play is or the right place is for test automation in the organization? And what's the balance between that and actually thinking critically about the software of things that maybe can't be automated?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think it's easy to get caught up it's easy to react, right? When something like this happens, oh my God, everyone's doing automation. Let me do it as well. The way I look at it, Joe, is that automated testing specifically, and in general, maybe having higher quality software, to me, it's a means to an end. Because all of these things, whether you use automated testing, manual testing, you don't do any testing, how much DevOps do you do, how seamless is your pipeline, all of those things are a means to an end. And I think the overall initiative from a business perspective needs to be, what is your vision as a company? And I don't mean that in every company has a vision, but is quality and the maintenance of quality and the pursuit of 100% quality, bug-free, whatever the case may be, is that one of your guiding principles? I think that is something that businesses need to ask. If, we will not ship bad software no matter what. We will not cut corners. We will reward good software practices. If you're a software company, let's say, a specific example, do you reward a culture of quality? Do you, and on the flip side, do you punish one that doesn't take quality into account in everything that we do? Are you proactive when it comes to this versus reactive? Again, none of these things I referred to specifically apply to software alone. I think they're more fundamentally about the kind of, the guiding principles that form the foundation of your company's vision. Once you have those, then I think depending on where you are in your life cycle, depending on your customer base, the market you're going after, the tools you use, the software you build, the business problem you're trying to solve, automated testing is likely going to play an important role. Maybe not right away. Maybe not in every use case. Maybe it's something you can afford to, play around with. Maybe there's some more basic stuff you've got to do before that. So then it becomes a means to achieve that end. And so, if you don't know what that end goal is, I think Stephen Covey, one of his principles, begin with the end in mind, or you can look at, if you don't know what people, one metaphor, we've commonly heard is if you don't know where you're going, any path will get you there. So I don't think automation testing is the solution to every problem. It could be one of the tools in your tool set, provided your guiding principles center around a key element that quality is important to you. As you see where I'm going with it, I think these are methods that we all use as needed when they make sense, provided the overall vision includes guiding principles around quality as a business.
Absolutely. So the end goal is quality. It's not necessarily the way you test. However you test, it just needs to be able to find risk and make sure that it doesn't affect your users, I guess.
Exactly. And it's like if you had that quality principle and if you had that quality ethos, you would apply it to, the way you interviewed candidates to find the best person for your business.
Yep.
That is not maybe an automated testing solution. You may not use automated testing for it. It might just be in the way you interact with your prospective employees. It might be the way you refine your candidate experience. Again, depending on tools you may use, there might be a room for software, for automated testing. Sometimes it may not be, but it's core. If it's core to you, then the tools will follow.
Absolutely. And you can't bake quality into software after it's created. So I totally agree with you. From the beginning all the way to the end, quality needs to be part of every single stage. So Shailesh, I guess another thing I think of is sometimes people do the opposite. Rather than having all automation, some have no automation. And I think in the era of DevOps and continuous testing, you do need some sort of automation. And so I'm just curious to know, based on your experience, can you estimate how many companies do you think actually are running automated tests? Do you still see people resisting it, or are more companies embracing it?
I can speak from my, again, limited relative to your experience. Obviously, you've talked to a lot more companies. I can speak from my experience, Joe. What I've seen, I would estimate, is probably 20 to 30% in terms of companies that are using automated testing. I've not seen anybody being 100% there in terms of we're using it everywhere we should. There's really nothing more we need to do. We've reached the peak, as it were. I haven't seen that. There's definitely, like any other population you can examine, there will be a range of people who are, on one end of the spectrum, people who are on the other end and trying to, maybe are in a position where they can teach others how to do it. I would estimate it's 20 to 30% of places where automation testing would make sense. They've actually adopted it. Now, why have companies not done it? Have they? Do all of them agree that it needs to be done? I think in principle they do, because again, information asymmetry these days is going down between what one company knows and the other. I mean, obviously, I'm not talking about competitive intelligence, but just with the internet and everything, the way information flows in today's economy, in today's world, I think most companies are aware that this is something that could be useful. This is something that we need to do. So I don't think that there's a lack of intent. I think, if I take kind of my own personal problem solving framework, which is, intent, will, knowledge, execution, and feedback. That's my own little, loop around how I look at a problem and say, okay, is there an intent to solve the problem? Yes, there is. Next is the will. A lot of companies, the intent is there. They want to do automated testing. The will is sometimes hard to find because change is hard, as I mentioned right in the beginning, I think, to your first question. It's easier to do what I've always done. And, bringing myself to do something different is hard, especially when it's new or, maybe I don't have all the processes in place. I have conflicting priorities. I got so many things on my mind. Does this become core? Does this become context? As Jeffrey Moore famously wrote about. I think that is where people start, that funnel starts narrowing down. I think intent is there. People understand it. And then it comes down to, do you know how to do it? It's not that easy. It's, it requires a certain level of skill set. It requires certain changes to the way you do things. It requires changes to maybe the way, the way you incentivize people in your engineering organization. Then, sometimes the pain isn't obvious until it's too late. So it then depends on what kind of processes you have. How do you react to change in your organization? Then there's, and these are all reasons why I think it's not as high as it should be, thinking that it won't happen to me. And that's another common thing that people say, well, yes, this is great. I don't think we need it. My customers aren't this. My market isn't that. Some cases you may be right. In some cases it may not be. The good news is in my job and as I travel around the world meeting customers, as we look at, people who are on various stages of that journey, the good news is that I see that number growing. I see people genuinely wanting to at least figure out if this is right for them, not just as a fad, but actually wanting to do this, thanks to also a lot of engineers who have grown up in a world where open source frameworks are the norm. These sort of testing frameworks were kind of default, maybe in their last job, so they bring that practice with them. And so fundamentally, I think the DNA is changing. But like any change of that magnitude and of that level of consequence, it's great that it's happening, but I think it's going to take time. And I think all of us in the industry, it behooves us to make sure that we educate customers and we're able to share practices like you do on your show, so that we're all aware and we are, able to become better at this whole thing.
Awesome. I definitely agree. It is hard, and to make it part of the DNA, people are struggling, I think, though, with certain things, especially mobile devices. And seeing that you are a cloud provider, I'm just curious to know, what are your thoughts on, with the rise of mobile computing, how does that affect automated testing? And where do you actually see automation testing and mobile testing in the future? Is that something you see more of, or do you think more AI-based technologies are going to sweep in and take care of everything for us?
Oh, AI is the answer to everything, right? Why not? You can, I can say AI and then let you pose whatever question you want. I'll probably be partially correct these days, at least it seems like. But I think it's a huge, huge, huge driver, just the rise in mobile computing and the ubiquity of it as much, right? As much as it's just the sheer numbers, but the fact that it's not just, incredible growth in one place or in one geography or in one segment of the population or in one industry. It's truly, truly one of these incredibly global phenomenon that I think is changing lives, and we're all beneficiaries from it. Like anything else, there's downsides. And I talked about, trying to stay a stress-free life in a digitally connected world. But I think in the last 2 decades, at least in my career in the software industry and working with, Fortune 500 through small, medium businesses, through individual freelancers and individual developers across, plethora of industries, I think the last 2 decades or so, generally, we tried to create that perfect market of one, right? You saw the growth of CRM, you saw the growth of tools and methods that would try to create that, whether it was the perfect ad from Google or the perfect product or the perfect sales process if you're a CRM company. That was kind of, I think, what drove a lot of the associated practice and technologies around it. Today, I think we're trying to create markets of millions, not a market of one. We're trying to create markets of millions because the moment I have an idea, the barrier to entry to creating that idea has come down dramatically, again, thanks to open source and a bunch of these frameworks, platforms like Coursera, Udacity, and others that I use to stay at the cutting edge or, on top of what's going on in my industry. But it's so easy to learn these things. And now going back to the ubiquity about, your product is instantly now potentially reaching a market of, a billion people, couple of billion people. And you have no way of knowing what browsers they're going to use, what devices they're on, especially with Android, all the inherent fragmentation in Android devices, and the sheer combination of, device, browser version. If you're talking about desktops, another layer added because of the OS itself and, the operating system, then the browser. The sheer magnitude and complexities, it's not worth trying to do it yourself. You can think it's easy, but I think the software test lab is going the way of the dinosaur over time. And that is definitely accelerating. And mobile devices have made that incredibly, make that transformation much faster. So I think with the world opening up and you not knowing exactly, you can target certain markets, but you can't really be sure where your product's going to be used. I don't think the folks who created Fortnite knew how popular their game was going to become. Clearly, it's a great game and it's got some amazing stuff, but still, I don't even think they realized how fast it would go viral. And so if you can't really test for all scenarios, let's take mobile devices, all various devices and combinations of browser and devices, you might be missing out on a huge part of the market, and you might not even know that you missed out, because the choice that mobile brings and mobile devices bring, and frankly, in a way, a little unfortunate, the kind of lack of patience we have now. I've seen people, my kids do this, right? Try an app, it doesn't work. Guess what? Immediately uninstall next app. So the customers are now, you can lose loyalty much faster if things don't work. And in many cases, you may not get a second chance. And so I think with the growth of mobile devices and the ubiquity of the internet, although there's still, I think, 3 billion people who don't have a reliable connection. So if you think this is fast, imagine what happens when all 7 billion of us have a reliable internet connection and an affordable phone in our hand. I think it's just going to make it all the more, orders of magnitude more complex and important.
Well, I think it's critical what you just mentioned. And I think maybe I'm wrong. I think a lot of companies focus just on the US. And there's a lot of, I think most business happens outside the US with all these other users and probably all these devices and all these different speeds and different languages. How does someone make sure that they're also taking into account all their users, not just a small set of the users when they're trying to create quality software?
I think you have to, that's not, that's more than just a testing problem. Right. I think that starts with just identifying who your users are. Maybe, in some ways I might be harkening back to some of the best practices around product management and engineering, but, defining the product, understanding what the user wants, understanding what is it that they care about, creating a user experience that just draws people to your product where, once they're there, even if it doesn't work, they clamor for the bug to be fixed in case it gets there. I think it's, testing again, I think it's one step in the whole chain. I think, and I think most software companies would agree, most companies that have software in their ecosystem would agree that, you can have bug-free software, but fundamentally that software needs to solve an important problem or provide a very interesting benefit so that users are willing to actually pay for it or start using it, or whatever the means of usage are, measures of usage are. It has to fundamentally provide value. Once that is given, then if it has no bugs and if it's of high quality, that is just like icing on the cake. There are examples of not so great software products that have still survived and managed to get out of the situation they're in because just the amount of value they provided was just so incredible that people were willing to put up with stuff. Now I think that barrier is going down. The patience that people have is going down. And you have a global audience for pretty much any mobile app. If you put it on a marketplace, by definition, it's available anywhere in the world. So I think that, again, going back to that point about quality being fundamental to everything we do, it has to be part of the way you design your product. It has to be part of the way you develop code. Has to, scalability, reliability, performance have to be fundamental to everything that you do. And then obviously quality at every step, make sure inserting quality at every step ensures that you're not catching something too late in the cycle, because it's obviously way more expensive to correct it, further down the chain or further right, if you will, if you think of a linear scale, which is where the whole shift left movement is making a huge splash in the industry, which I think is great. And so I think the idea that, this is just a testing scenario or just in the domain of testing, I think is a bit short-sighted. As you mentioned, it has to go into the way we design products, understanding our users, understanding where the value is, the entire value chain, and then using sound quality principles and the right tools, and methods, whether it's automated testing, manual, whatever, to make sure that process is as effective as possible and as efficient as possible.
Now, I think this has been the theme of the talk so far is quality, and it's beyond the IT department. It's the whole organization. Mm-hmm. I guess you even use the term software is eating the world, but, it seems to be everyone always, when they say that, they're just thinking of software development. In your experience, based on speaking with all these companies, do you know if this message has actually gotten to the highest levels, like the C-level boardroom? Do they actually think about software quality, or is that so below them that, it's just an IT type thing?
Definitely not. And, I've been in boardrooms in the last 2 years, definitely, even before I was at BrowserStack, where quality has come up. I've heard the terms, that these terms we talk about, like shift left and it being a key part of the CIO's agenda. I've heard that from our existing customers.
I've heard this beyond just the confines of the engineering department or the quality department. Definitely. Now, again, like any other population, in some companies or in some sectors of the economy, it is more pronounced than it is in others. I see a lot of it in financial services, insurance, obviously in e-commerce, in software companies, core software companies. It's pretty much everywhere. It's definitely not relegated to certain departments. It is part of who the companies are. And I think this, we've associated the word agile with only software development, but from where I sit, I think you're an agile company. It's good if you have agile software development. Again, that's a means to an end. At the end of the day, are you an agile company? Because if you're not agile, you're not going to be able to compete. You're not going to be able to react. And in this fast-moving environment with tremendous change on a global scale, where barriers to entry to create another product and be disintermediated or whatever the verb might be is becoming relatively easier from a few years ago. The question comes down to, you have to survive first and then, let's worry about success later. And for survival, you have to be agile. So this idea that underpins a lot of the conversations we have around quality when it relates to software are now elevating themselves to just how companies fundamentally exist and run and survive. So I think that's great. In fact, I read a statistic recently that I think 75 years ago, the average age of a company in the S&P 500 was 50 something years. And in like a few years ago, I read it in a Credit Suisse report, I think. So I can't recall it right away, but it's order of magnitude directionally, I'm correct. 75 years ago, I think it was 55 years or 57 years was the average age of a company in the S&P 500. Now it's about 13. It was about 13 a few years ago, and it's falling.
Wow.
Which means for a lot of companies, their next competitor, or their biggest competitor that's going to get rid of them from the S&P 500 or the Dow Jones Industrial Average is probably not yet born. Or if it's born, it's just a teenager. That, I think, is fundamental, right? So this ability to react, the ability to reassess, the ability to compete, all of those things rely on the same fundamental principles of agility, seamlessness, continuous XYZ, continuous reaction, continuous process improvement, continuous integration in a business sense, if you will, not in the way we use it in the context of software. I think that's become core, and that's at the boardroom, and I think that's great.
Right, so Shailesh, a lot of times people always talk about the digital landscape. So it's now almost the end of June, so we're 6 months into the year. Where do you see this all going? Are there any trends you're already seeing that when we look back 12 months from now, we're going to say, oh yeah, that was the year of this? Do you see any of that happening, or where do you see us all heading in the next 12 months or so?
Yeah, I definitely think it will. I don't know if there'll be a label for it. I don't know if we'll have our own hashtag in this for this industry. Although I think that would be a badge of honor. But I think if I look forward and try to apply the benefit of hindsight, I think we'll see that there's been a tremendous shift in quality becoming fundamental to how companies are run. Software being so critical to companies' success and just the way companies are architected. Software quality has become critical. How they get to that level of quality and to what magnitude depends on companies and their place in the life cycle. Net, I think we're going to look back and look at some wins and some losses, but either specific examples or certain trends that have become louder and more pronounced than others. I think when we look back and use that to kind of project the future, I think I see tremendous optimism across the industry, and I think people will start feeling that. Open source, again, thanks, has democratized this industry, which I think is awesome. But it has one thing we will look back on and kind of almost be like, phew, man, that was hard, and it's only going to be harder, is around the pace of change. I don't think we've seen anything yet. And if we thought mobile was tough, we've all talked about Internet of Things. We've been talking about it now for some time, but I think we're starting to see that become real and become part of our lives and manifest itself in more serious ways. So now it's no longer just my device in my hand. It's my device as a network of devices in a broad ecosystem at the consumer level. I think that's coming. And so now, it's really not only about, I think, it's really about software not just running companies. I think it's about bad software can ruin companies is how I think we'll look at the world in a few months.
All right, Shailesh, before we go, is there one piece of actionable advice you can give someone to help improve their software quality efforts? And let us know the best way to find or contact you.
One piece of advice, I think I would take it back to what I started with around how this parallels to living a low-stress life or avoiding high stress is, recognize that this is change for everybody and it's hard. Discipline is key, making sure that you understand, learn, etc., and apply that discipline. And the last thing is, don't give up. I think achieving high quality is a worthy goal. Stick with it, and it will pay off in spades. High quality spades, I guess I should add. And the best way to reach me is Shailesh at BrowserStack.com. And that's SHAILESH.
Thank you, Shailesh, for your software quality awesomeness. For links to everything of value we covered in this episode, head on over to testtalks.com/219. And while you're there, make sure to click on the sign up for a free trial link under the exclusive sponsor section to learn all about our awesome sponsor, Sauce Labs, and their super awesome products and services. And if this episode has helped you in any way, why not share with a friend or coworker? And together we can help spread automation awesomeness to the masses. So that's it for this episode of Test Talks. I'm Joe, and my mission is to help you succeed with creating automation awesomeness. As always, test everything and keep the good. Cheers.
Thanks for listening to the Test Talks podcast. Head on over to www.testtalks.com for full show notes, amazing blog articles, and other automation awesomeness.